introduce our speaker. So, uh, on behalf of Paleo ECR India and the event coordination team, we are very much delighted to welcome you to another session of Paleo ECR India Saturday Talk Series. And as we all know that this initiative, aims to create an open and interactive platform where all the early career researchers and senior scientists can come together and to exchange the ideas, discuss emerging scientific developments, and also to foster collaboration across the diverse field of value sciences and artificial sciences. I don't know the voice. Still, I'm getting a noise from someone. Okay, sorry for the interruption. I don't. So today we have we are very honored to host our speaker, Dr. Himadri Saini, who is currently a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Melbourne, Australia, since April 2025. And prior to this, she served as a postdoctoral research associate at University of South Wales from 2023 to 2025. And she completed her PhD in climate science from the University of New South Wales in 2023 and holds a master degree in atmospheric and space science from Satribai Phule Pune University and BSc honors in physics from MSU Baroda University. Her research focuses on paleoclimate modeling, marine biogeochemistry, paleoceanography, and climate dynamics, with particular emphasis on the large-scale ocean circulation systems such as Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC, and their influences on the regional climate system like the Australian monsoon. So today, she is going to talk about the ocean circulation and ice sheet control on Australian hydroclimate. So before we begin, I like to give a few brief announcements. I request everyone to keep your mic mute throughout the talk, and please feel free to post any questions in the chat box and use the raise your hand feature. And we will have around presentation around 45 minutes, followed by a 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A session. So with that, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Himadri Saini to deliver today's talk. Thank you all once again for joining us today. So now I'll stop sharing and Himadri, please share slides.
I hope you can see my screen in the right format. Is it the right format?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, it's full screen, right? Sorry, I have multiple screens here, and I.
No, but we are looking your
okay.
The second
is it better?
Yeah. So, yes. Now it's better.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm using Teams for the first time for a presentation. I hope it goes well. Okay, thanks a lot for inviting me for this talk. I'm really honored to be here to be speaking to this community. I think it's a really great initiative, and I'm very happy to be part of this. I hope with this talk I can make your Saturday worthwhile. So, okay, so I'm here to talk about ocean circulation and ice sheet controls on Australian hydroclimate. This is some work that I did as a postdoc in UNSW. I am at University of Melbourne now, but doing something different. I also did my PhD in UNSW, but that was all on marine biogeochemistry. This talk will be divided in two different parts. So the first part would be ocean circulation's impact on Australian rainfall, and the second part would be the ice sheet controls on the hydroclimate of Australia. So for the first part, this is something that we published last year. It's titled as Australian Hydroclimate Response to the Collapse of Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. I'm not sure how many of you here know about AMOC, but I'll give a brief intro in the next slide. But this paper is published and it can be accessed with this QR code. So the AMOC is like a large ocean circulation belt, which is originating mostly from the North Atlantic region, where the surface water gets cold enough and dense enough to sink to the bottom of the ocean and travels southward. And that in that way, it comes to the surface in lower latitudes when it gets warm and gets more buoyancy to come up, and then travels back to North Atlantic as surface warm water, and closes the whole loop. Now, this whole ocean circulation is very crucial because, so because it redistributes like the high amount of heat and nutrients across the planet and thereby impacts global climate. It is in news in recent few years because it's been slowing down in the recent decades. There have also been some studies suggesting a stronger decline by about 34 to 45% by the end of this century. Um, Furthermore, a latest study based on early warning signals suggests that a collapse could also happen at the end of this century. So these studies underscore the pressing need for immediate action regarding AMOC and to understand its impact on different climate. Um, but that's all about recent and future things. But AMOC changes have also occurred in past climate, which some of us here know as Henry's events, when there were some iceberg discharged into the North Atlantic from neighboring ice sheets, and they led to an increase of fresh water in the ocean, which led to a collapse or a strong weakening of AMOC in those past climates. Um, Impacts of such AMOC shutdown on Australia are not so clear at the moment. And while most of the periods of AMOC weakening occurred during, sorry, yeah, during last glacial periods, there are some evidence of AMOC weakening in interglacial periods as well, the warm climates. Um, So in this study, what we did is we looked into a warmer climate, which is called the last interglacial climate. It happened around 127,000 years ago. And we also compared this climate with the pre-industrial climate, which is like 1850. The LIG not only exhibits evidence of AMOC weakening, but it also, um, sorry, sorry, I hit a different button here. My presentation is still visible, right? I guess it is.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so the LIG not only exhibits evidence of AMOC weakening, but also stands out as the warmest interglacial in the last 800,000 years. So it makes it a very interesting time period for our study. Um, so the main thing or the main difference in the LIG climate was that we had a very strong insolation in the polar regions in both the hemispheres during summer compared to pre-industrial, which is shown with this small diagram here, where red is showing high insolation in LIG compared to PI. What we did in this study is we performed some numerical simulations with the Australian Earth system model under pre-industrial and last interglacial boundary conditions. So I'm told just now that this is the first modeling talk, but I'm guessing most of you are aware of climate models, but I'll still give a brief intro on how we did this. So the first thing was that we selected our Australian Earth system model. It has different components of Earth system, which is like atmosphere, land surface, sea ice, biogeochemistry on land. Then there's a coupler which connects atmosphere, land, sea ice with ocean. So all of these systems are connected to each other. And we also have the marine biogeochemistry module in this system. So it's a fully coupled Earth system model for performing our paleoclimate simulations. Here are some details about the resolution of these different components. The resolution matters because depending on what your research question is, we can use different types of Earth system model, and we can also use different resolutions for them. Um, we have also done some work where we use a very high resolution ocean model because we are interested in an ocean related study compared to atmosphere. So all these kind of things you can do with the Earth system model. Um, yeah, so then in that system model, we chose our region of North Atlantic. Where, okay. We chose our region of North Atlantic where we are adding fresh water in this region, the yellow box, um, to simulate the AMOC shutdown. So adding fresh water leads to the decrease in density of surface water here, and it shuts down the AMOC. We use a value of zero point 0.4 Swerdrop in here, which is a bit higher compared to other studies. People also get a AMOC shutdown in their study by using zero point 0.2 Swerdrop or less than that. But here our goal was to get a AMOC shutdown in Australian Earth System model, and zero point 0.4 was the threshold that we got. The time series here shows the AMOC shutdown scenario in both pre-industrial and last interglacial climates. So PI and LIG here are control climates. PI is in black, LIG is in blue. And then the red and green are the freshwater experiments. The green one is freshwater experiment under LIG, and red one is freshwater under pre-industrial. We call it a AMOC shutdown when the AMOC strength, which is measured by Swerdrop, is reaching close to 5 Swerdrop here. And for our analysis, we choose these last 50 years averaged compared to the 100 years average of the control simulation for both the climates. Yeah, so that's pretty much about it in this slide. So moving on into results, the first thing I'm showing here is the difference between the background control climate, LIG minus PI. This is well detailed by this study by Nick Young et al. 2021, who performed the LIG and pre-industrial simulations with Access, the Australian Earth System model, and published a study on the difference of LIG and PI. But in general, what it shows is that LIG climate is warmer than PI, especially for the northern hemisphere because we had high insolation at that time. There were some land sea temperature contrasts. So there is like India, which is very cold here. Oops. But overall, the LIG climate is warmer than PI. As for the precipitation shown in the right, we see that there is a northward shift of the intertropical convergence zone in LIG compared to pre-industrial, which is connected with the warming in the northern hemisphere. So, so ITZZ always shifts to the warmer hemisphere. And so in this case, it's the northern hemisphere. Coming to the impact of AMOC shutdown, the top panel is showing the difference for pre-industrial climate, freshwater minus control, and the bottom one is showing it for LIG climate, freshwater minus control again. And here on the left side, we have the surface air temperature anomalies, which shows like the general pattern that we see in an AMOC shutdown scenario. So like overall, the broad response is that we get a cooling in the northern hemisphere because when the AMOC shuts down, it leads to the reduction of heat transport to the north. So the heat gets trapped in the southern hemisphere, and which is why we are seeing this warming in the southern hemisphere and cooling in the northern hemisphere. For the precipitation also, we see that overall there is a southward shift of ITCZ. So like I said, that it moves always to the warmer hemisphere to compensate for the change in the heat transport. So when the ocean heat transport changes, so does the atmospheric heat transport, which is linked with ITCZ position. So in AMOC shutdown, we get a southward shift of ITCZ. So looking at this picture, you'll see that overall these responses are almost similar between the two climates. But when we zoom into the regional hydroclimate, so for example, here in Australia, we see some differences. As the Australian precipitation is governed by different processes in Austral summer and winter, our analysis focuses on DJF and JJA seasonal response. DJF here is the summer for Southern Hemisphere and winter for Northern Hemisphere, and JJA is the winter season. So we get our monsoon for Australia in DJF, which is going on right now. And what we see here is that in an AMOC shutdown scenario, there is a large increase of rainfall over northern Australia in both LIG and PI. And there is a decrease in rainfall in the south part of the maritime continent in both the climates. The difference is that in LIG climate, the increased rainfall is concentrated all over Australia, including the left and right side. But in pre-industrial, the increase is happening mostly in this northwestern sector um, for PI. This is connected to the Hadley cell circulation that when we have a AMOC shutdown, we get the reduction in ocean heat transport to the north. And to compensate for the reduction of that global heat transport, the northern hemisphere Hadley cell, represented here with this very simple schematic. So this circle, this feature here is showing northern hemisphere Hadley cell, and this one is southern hemisphere Hadley cell. The cloudiness in near the equator is showing the ITCZ, the intertropical convergence zone, which is the convergence zone of the two cells of the Hadley cell. Oops. So when we get a reduction of heat transport to the north, the northern hemisphere Hadley cell shifts south to compensate for that reduction, and it also strengthens in the AMOC shutdown case. So first we will take the LIG case. This plot could be like very complex, but it's the stream function plot, and the red here is indicating strengthening of the Hadley cell. The shift is shown by these contours, the solid lines here. So blue is the freshwater experiment, so LIG freshwater, and black is the control experiment. And here you can see that it has shifted southward in LIG freshwater. Same is true for pre-industrial as well, that we get a shift in the northern hemisphere Hadley cell and also the strengthening. The stronger and shifted Hadley cell causes a 2-degree southward displacement of ITCZ in our simulation in total. So when the ITCZ shifts south, it leads to increase in rainfall over Australia and decrease in rainfall over the maritime continent. Same is true for pre-industrial as well. But like I mentioned, there is a difference between these two, that the pre-industrial rainfall is mostly constricted to the western part. This is because of this another kind of circulation. So the increase in rainfall, in addition to ITCZ, is also connected to the cyclonic circulation associated with this low pressure anomaly over the Indian Ocean, which stems from a Rossby wave plane that originates from equatorial Atlantic. This is where we get our increase in warming when we have the AMOC shutdown. So the southern equatorial waters in the Atlantic warms up. It leads to a strong tropical convection in this area due to increased SST, which leads to the Rossby wave pattern, ultimately creating a low pressure or negative pressure anomaly over Australia. The drying pattern that is simulated south of Australia is also connected to this Rossby wave, which is leading to a high pressure system here south of Australia. This is also connected a bit with the southward shift of the Hadley cell. So here, when there's the southward shift of the Hadley cell in the southern hemisphere as well. Now for pre-industrial, the same mechanism happens, but the warming that we get in South Equatorial Atlantic is less compared to LIG. So the response to the Rossby wave propagation is also weaker, which is why the negative pressure anomaly doesn't reach all over Australia or crosses it, but stays within the Indian Ocean regime and also touches just the Western Australian part, which is why we have this increase happening only on the western part of Australia. The drying is again connected with the high pressure systems with the change in the Hadley cell in the southern hemisphere. And now coming to JJ, so the JJ season is more important for the rainfall on the southern sector of the continent. It doesn't really impact the northern region. The high pressure system south of Australia strengthens in this season and also shifts southward, which leads to suppression over this region, which is causing this drying in both the climate, so LIG and PI. But there's also the connection with the frontal systems south of Australia. So when the high pressure systems shift south, they also shift the rain bearing fronts to the southern direction, which leads to drying over the continent, basically. Um, the LIG response is less significant compared to pre-industrial. We have talked about it a bit in our paper, which is connected to just there is a larger difference in the pre-industrial case for JJA compared to LIG in JJA. Oh, yeah. So that was pretty much about this paper. So the broad conclusion was that the AMOC shutdown leads to stronger austral summer monsoon over northern Australia. Drier conditions are simulated in southeast of Australia during JJ. So summer gets wetter and winter gets drier. The response of Australian hydroclimate is sensitive to the mean boundary conditions, which is the initial ITCZ position. So like I mentioned in LIG, the ITCZ is northward compared to PI. So in the AMOC shutdown, Z position is still northward compared to pre-industrial freshwater ITCZ. And that has some different impacts on Australian climate. The future changes of ITCZ position could impact AMOC weakening as well as impact on Australia. This plot here is something that I just included for the discussion among this group. So the current warming trend is much larger in the northern hemisphere than in the southern hemisphere, thanks to the Arctic warming, which is occurring at around 4 times compared to the global rate. Because of this, now the northern hemisphere is currently warmer than southern hemisphere. The ITCZ position is northward over land at least. The CMIP6 simulations performed with the same model, the Australian Earth System model, suggest that global annual mean position of the ITCZ could shift northward at the end of the century. So this is something that I'm showing with these scatter plots here. The different colors here represent pre-industrial here. LIG is northward. Pre-industrial freshwater is here, and LIG freshwater ITCZ is here. And then the purple and the brown colors are representing the freshwater simulation that we have performed with this model under SSP 585 scenario. So the very worst case scenario in the future. And we see that the end of century, so between 2080 to 2100, the ITCZ position that we get compared to the warming in the Atlantic is similar to what we have for LIG. This makes LIG like the really good analog for understanding future warming climates because it also has a asymmetrical warming pattern. So like more warming in the northern hemisphere compared to southern hemisphere, and which is what we are seeing now and also in the future. So it would be really interesting to understand the impacts of AMOC weakening or other processes under LIG climate to assess the same kind of changes in the future. This ends the part 1 of the talk. The paper again is shown here with this QR code. I hope you find it interesting. Moving on to the next part of the talk, now it's about the influence of glacial northern hemisphere ice sheets on atmospheric circulation. I said atmospheric circulation here because I'm just looking into different aspects of atmospheric circulation or different regions as well. But later on I connected to Australian hydroclimate again. Um, this group, of course, know that Earth's climate has been strongly influenced by the growth and retreat of ice sheets, especially in the northern hemisphere. Well, we have in the Antarctic as well, but northern hemisphere is the more noticeable one. When these large ice sheets expand, they cool the planet, most notably over regions like North Atlantic and Southern Ocean, the polar regions where their influence is more direct. Ice sheet growth also reshapes the land sea configuration by lowering sea levels. This exposes land bridges and alters surface heating patterns since land and ocean respond differently to solar energy. Here in this talk, I'm presenting just the influence of these two ice sheets on Australian hydroclimate. This paper is also, well, not published really, it's present as preprint in Climate of the Past journal, but it's open to everyone. We have sent out the revisions yet, so I should hear back soon, but feel free to explore it in the meantime. Um, yeah, so just just to show a bit of the temperature variability in the climate that I'm going to address. I'm showing here the Greenland temperature variability in the past climate, like last 65,000 years ago. The blue box here is indicating last glacial period. LGM is somewhere around here, around 20,000 years ago, when we had the greatest ice sheet content, coldest temperature, and lowest CO2. As you can see, there is a large temperature variability of 8 to 10 degrees Celsius in Greenland temperature records during this time. Our goal is to assess one part of the reasons behind such kind of temperature variability. And for that, I am focusing on this climate around 49,000 years ago. So just before, just after, just before Henry's Radial 5, another AMOC shutdown episode that occurred during this time period. Henry's Radial 5, basically, yeah. But I am focusing at this climate around 49K because, well, it is very interesting. So the time series here shows CO2 in the top panel, summer insolation for both the hemisphere, northern and southern, and obliquity of Earth in the last 120,000 years ago. As you can see, 49K stands out here, having the highest obliquity in the whole last glacial cycle with a value of 24.3. At the same time, the CO2 during this climate is about 190 ppm, which is closer to the lowest CO2 we recorded in the last glacial cycle, which was for LGM, and it was around the CO2 here is 199, and here it is 190 almost. The obliquity is axial tilt, which influences the insolation on the planet. And because of high obliquity, we have very high insolation in both the hemispheres, again, both the poles at 49K compared to PI. But despite all these climatic influences, because CO2 was low, our 49K climate was a glacial climate, which is making it a bit of an interesting time period. I would also like to point out that this obliquity is higher than LIG, which was the most interglacial climate in the last 800,000 years ago. And despite that, our 49K is a cold climate, and that's just connected to CO2, which is, I think, quite interesting. Like this unusual combination, high obliquity, insolation, low CO2, it's just a very compelling time slice to study role of ice sheets in shaping atmospheric circulation and regional as well as global hydroclimate response. Um, So, oh yeah, so what we did is we again simulated this climate using the climate model. And for that, what we did is we first used the orbital parameters, which is the eccentricity, obliquity, and yeah, insolation. No, insolation gets there. But we also use the greenhouse gases. So we have N2O in there, we have methane and CO2. We also use ice sheets at corresponding to this climate, sorry, this time period, and vegetation of this time period. And like I mentioned, so the ice sheets, when they form, they take up a lot of fresh water, so they influence the global sea level, and they also influence this global salinity of the ocean. So we changed topography based on the sea level at 49K, and sea level is based on the ice sheet formation at that time. And also we changed the salinity for that climate. We use the same model again, the Australian Earth System model, AXIS. I've already given the detail of that. Um, but just to refresh again, yeah, sorry, the perihelion index was the third one. Yeah, so just to give a brief refresher again. So our orbital parameters are different between 49K and PI. 49K has like very high obliquity, they tilt toward Earth, and the greenhouse gases are different between the two climate. The vegetation and topography is also different. The salinity is increased by 0.33 PSU based on the sea level at 49K and the ice sheet configuration. The river runoff around these boundaries are also adjusted to make it accordance with the topography, because when you change the topography, you have to change the river flow to the ocean. Otherwise, it will just get trapped in the mountains, and then that will just blow the model up. So we took care of all these things in our experiment or in this climate, basically. Um, just to highlight a few things. So, what I meant by changing ice sheet and topography is really just removing the whole of vegetation in the northern hemisphere and replacing it with ice wherever it was present at that time. The blue here is representing ice. There are different types of vegetation in this model, color coded here, but we mostly changed the ice in Laurentide region, the Northern American continent. The Eurasian ice sheet has also been changed, and the vegetation here is uh, well improved based on a few things. So, for example, we just removed T3 crops here because at that time, 49K years ago, we don't have crops and everything. So we removed it, but the values that we have for crops, we divided it in different types of dominant vegetation type in the same grid cell. And this has been done comparing with the Allen et al. Study here, which have the global vegetation reconstruction for last 140,000 years ago. So we chose 49K in their reconstruction. We added our ice wherever it was present, and we changed a few things like needle leaf, evergreen forest, or bare soil here, or vegetation in this Indian region and everything, comparing it with Allen et al. Study. If you notice carefully, yeah, yeah, just the the basic thing was just removing this needle leaf forest between the ice sheets present here, because we had the two domed ice sheet at 49K, and we can't have a forest between ice sheets, so we put bare soil in here. This has all been detailed well in our paper, which is up on preprint. Um, yeah, so there's the paper. Now, moving on to results again. So, just we first focused on our differences between the 49K and pre-industrial climate. So here I'm showing surface air temperature and SST anomalies between the two climate. Um, sorry, due to due to lower CO2 and extensive ice sheets, 49K was simulated to be a cooler climate than PI. We compared it with a few proxy records from the Greenland and Antarctic ice cores. If the stars are visible here, they show good agreement basically. Um, then global annual mean surface temperature at 49K was about 2.7 degrees lower than PI, with most pronounced cooling occurring in the northern hemisphere, and also over Antarctica. The SSTs were also colder, except in this region in the North Atlantic. These higher SSTs in the Labrador region is due to enhanced warm water transport in our simulation, because we have a very strong AMOC at 49K, and that strong AMOC is due to the changes in the topography here. So when we uh, put ice here, we changed the topography. A lot of the ocean became land. We reduced the sea level, so the straits, so for example, the Bering Strait and everything, they closed up. These changed the gyres in the northern Atlantic, which further changed the circulation, and we have a very strong warm water transport in this region, which is why our AMOC is high and SST is also high. Um, this has also been compared with previous studies which have done these kind of simulations, and it's a known phenomena that can happen due to change in topography. Um, as for the precipitation, drier conditions are simulated over northern high latitudes, especially over the ice sheet region, the Laurentide ice sheet region. We have a few regions where the precipitation increases. So, for example, in the North Atlantic and also Eurasia. So, sorry, the stippling here is indicating the non-significant changes. So, whatever is non-stippled, it's significant. So, there is a significant increase in precipitation over the North Atlantic region and over Eurasia. Um, Overall, if you look at like Southern Hemisphere land region, it's mostly drying, but with some regions showing increased in precipitation. Australia is one of those which is showing a very good increase in precipitation at this climate. Um, this is an extra slide actually, but I might just talk about it. What I'm doing here is I'm just comparing the surface air temperature anomalies and SST anomalies in the full boundary conditions, which have all the things that I said before, like orbital parameters, ice sheet, vegetation, topography, salinity, and comparing it with my simulations, which had just changes in orbital parameters and greenhouse gas. And this one is orbital parameters, greenhouse gas, and ice mass to show that it is the full application of all the boundary conditions that leads to the most significant changes in the climate compared to changing only orbital parameters or greenhouse gas or ice mass, which have very less influence. Um, to decompose the impact of ice sheets on atmospheric circulation, I'm showing just this very simple schematic again, which might not be scientifically accurate. But what this shows is that in today's climate, the warm water in the North Atlantic is transported north via the Gulf Stream, and atmospheric Rossby wave propagation results in a northeastward tilted Atlantic jet stream. This configuration contributes to the relatively mild winters in Europe compared to other regions at the similar latitudes in North America, because there's this warm water giving milder temperatures to Europe. In the presence of the ice sheets, the westerlies or the jet here strengthens, and it also shifts southward, and it also becomes more zonally oriented in its direction. Uh, so to get into the technical detail of it, what it does is the second panel, which is showing the winds. So the red here is indicating the strengthening of the jet here and also the southward shift of the jet. Blue is indicating weakening over here. We already have very strong cooling in the northern high latitudes. Due to these configurations, we have this a low pressure low pressure developing over northern Atlantic Ocean region, which is leading to our increase in rainfall. So here the stippling is actually indicating significance. I mixed up my plot, sorry. But yeah, so the change in the jet and its orientation and its shift leads to the changes in the Rossby wave propagation, which changes the convection over our region and leads to increase in precipitation. Now, over the land, it doesn't increase precipitation because we have a very strong cooling, which kind of dominates the whole response. Um, Here, I'm just showing the same shift in winds, the North Atlantic winds and latitude versus wind speed graph. The blue dashed line is the 49K with all the boundary conditions present. The blue and orange ones are fair. I'm using just one type of boundary condition, just to show that it is again the full application of boundary conditions, which leads to strong response in winds. The black is the PI, of course. So yeah, just strengthening and southward shift of the winds. Um, Now for JJA season also we see the same thing. So there is some strengthening of the jet and southward shift of the jet over Europe. We have cooling, we have the convection developing, and we have an increase in rainfall in northern Australia, northern Atlantic, as well as it being extended over to Europe. In this season, it extends over Europe because the temperatures here are milder, so the convection kind of dominates and it leads to increase in rainfall. Now, these results are consistent with previous studies, which are investigating the role of ice sheets over the North Atlantic region. But their influence, as we'll see now, that extend beyond the North Atlantic, and such kind of influences or impacts are lesser known in the community. So for example, the influence on the Hadley cell again. So this figure comes up again. Hadley cell and of course ITCZ because it's connected to Hadley cell. And then we'll look into Australia. So our results show that when there is ice sheet, so now this time the dashed one is 49K, the solid one is PI. And with the ice sheets and the changes in the North Atlantic jet, we have a southward shift of the Hadley cell because when the westerly shift southward, there is a southward shift of the Hadley cell. It it looks like something like this. Again, very simple schematic. Um, so we get a southward shift of the northern Hadley cell, and yeah, with that we have a southward shift of the ITCZ. Um, Coinciding with it, in our results, it shifts outward by about 1.5 degrees, which is quite a lot for this scale. Um, and thus it leads to increase in Australian rainfall in DJF. Now, this all seems very like simple in terms of the connection. But what's interesting here is that with the northern high latitudes being so cold and so dry, and Australia being very warm and wet, uh, it could be the time that we had the first human migration to Australia because they, at the same time, they were starting to travel around and they were traveling to the south because this was getting very dry and cold. Due to the lower sea level, we have these traits here which were opening up because the sea level dropped, and it made the passage simpler for the humans to come to Australia for the first time. Um, yeah, so it's again very interesting climate. Um, yeah, for JJ also we looked at the same pictures. So we looked into the southern hemisphere Hadley cell this time. There is a equatorward shift of the Hadley cell this time because we have the ice sheets in the Antarctic region as well. And with the height of the ice sheets, it's pushing the westerlies toward equator, which is coinciding with the shift of Hadley cell, southern hemisphere Hadley cell equatorward. With that shift, we have more drying over Australia because there is also a northward shift of ITCs at this time. Um, but yeah, like all the other regions are wet at that time. Um, yeah. This is just the slide to show this southern hemisphere westerlies again. Um, Again, the blue dashed is the full boundary condition 49K, black is PI, and the orange and cyan colors are individual boundary condition. So in DJF, we have a strengthening, not a shift of southern hemisphere westerlies, but in JJA, we really have the equatorward shift because of the presence of the Antarctic ice sheet. Its extent and height plays a very dominant role in influencing westerlies. Um, yeah, just to give the conclusions again, the Northern Hemisphere ice sheets have global impacts, influencing both the hemispheres and regional circulation patterns, not just North Atlantic or northern regions, as shown by a few previous studies. Their presence strengthens and shifts the Northern Atlantic westerlies equatorward, which increases precipitation over northern Australia and Eurasian summer rainfall. Uh, these kind of shifts also induce a shift in the Hadley cell in the northern hemisphere and ITCZ, which leads to increase in rainfall over Australia. The combined topography of Laurentide and Antarctic ice sheets, so the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, both contributes to a northward shift of the westerlies in the southern hemisphere, the Hadley cell, and also the ITCZ, which also again influences the regional climate of Australia. Yeah, like I said, so this paper is also up in preprint. And with that, thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Himadri, for I think such a wonderful talk. I think many people will now uh, see the power of climate models because ultimately the goal of paleoclimatologists is to simulate the future. So until unless we have a good climate modelers, we cannot talk about the future climate change. So
Yeah.
thanks for the wonderful talk. Now the floor is open for the Q&A session. If someone has a questions or any doubt, any suggestions, you all are welcome.
Hi, Himadri.
Okay.
It was a very great presentation.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, and I'm just curious, like, have you done any proxy studies with this, like micropaleontological analysis? Have you integrated any?
No, I haven't done any of the proxy work. I am working with a team who is doing some speleothem work. But because we are interested mostly in the Australian rainfall response, so they have the new speleothem records from Australia or Southern Australia, and we're going to compare our results with their records, but nothing else. Yeah.
So it's kind of previously generated data which you're interpreting and working upon, right? Mostly. Or are you going and doing any real-time collection of data as well?
No, I'm not collecting any data. I'm just simulating these kind of climates. So let me put, yeah. So I'm just simulating these kind of climate. And um, for that, what I'm doing is I am using the few controls that we take for the climate. So for example, orbital parameters. These have been, like published by Berger et al., who has calculated the insolation or the obliquity and eccentricity for every year in the past. I am using that data to put in my model, and I'm using the greenhouse gas data, which has also been published based on ice core records or sediment records, and I'm using that data. Similarly, all these other things in my climate model, and then I'm letting the model to simulate this climate for me. And what we do is we first simulate the pre-industrial climate with any model, any climate model that we have, and we compare that pre-industrial climate with the records that are present. So all the records that you may have mentioned now, And if it is true, then that means the model is working. And then we test it for past climates. So for example, for 49K, I have tested it with the ice cores, which have the temperature data for this climate. Well, of course, the data, the what do you call, like the spatial resolution is not that great. So we, like as a community, we need to work on improving our models, but also our data coverage in the ocean as well as continents. Um, so yeah, like I've used few available proxy data for this climate to see that the simulated climate from my climate model is correct. And so far, like just looking at these pictures, it looks correct. We have used the data for precipitation as well. I'm just not showing in my paper. It's being shown in other paper. Does that answer your question?
Excellent, excellent. It was really great work, Himadri.
Thank you.
Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Okay, Akansha, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. I think you wrote in the chat box, but if possible, it will be better to Akansha. Okay, so Madri, can you read the chat?
Yes, yes.
Chat.
Okay, I'm just
Yeah,
looking
okay.
at it now. I'll just repeat it for everyone. I just wanted to know whether different locations of freshwater input within the Northern Atlantic have a different impact in terms of the magnitude of AMOC decline or not. Asking because 8.2 Ka event, large sensitivity to location of freshwater forcing was reported by some authors. So was it something that you also noticed in your experiment? That's a great question, Akansha. Yes, different location of freshwater input does impact AMOC. I haven't done it in my study here. There is a different study which might come in like in next few weeks, where we have tested the impact of different location of freshwater on AMOC, but not for these climates, like a different climate, which will tell us about the sensitivity of AMOC to locations in our Australian model. So to answer your question, it does impact, but I haven't tested it. And for 8.2K event as well, yeah, I'm just saying it because this is a platform of discussion. So there's another study by a group with the same model which has simulated 8.2K event as well. I'm happy to share the paper later, but it's one of these authors here. Sorry, I'll just mention. So Yanchuan Du, she has published a paper last year, I think, on 8.2K event, and she has done the AMOC shutdown in that experiment. But again, the same region. The region we are selecting here is the same in all our climates. But the study that's coming up in next 2 to 3 weeks, hopefully, will have different location. So I'm happy to share that.
Anyone else? Partha,
Yes, yes.
please go ahead.
Okay, okay. So I just wanted to first start with a comment regarding the comparison with proxy data. I mean, I don't know exactly about Australia, but you know, kind of we see a similar response in Southern Hemisphere in the South America, and there people have seen with also with the proxy based on marine as well as terrestrial records that the whenever you see a change in AMOC, the
Mm,
ITCG shifts and
mm,
there is a complex I mean change in precipitation pattern. At some places we see increase in precipitation and at some places we see decrease in precipitation. And
mhm,
what I am talking about is in terms of millennial timescales. But in terms of centennial timescales, we don't know. I mean,
mhm,
with that background, I would like to, ask a question, not exactly on your talk, but a general question.
mhm,
Like, do you expect that there would be a lag between AMOC and the change in precipitation we see, or that response would be very quick? I mean, if there would be a lag, would that be in terms of hundreds of years, tens of years, or thousands of years? Do you have any idea about that?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question, Partha. If I had to guess, I would say that yes, there would be a lag because there is a lag between this whole response as well. So, like, we get this cooling very quickly, but it takes time to get the warming in the southern hemisphere. And in our model, in these simulations, we are still struggling to get a warming that will impact our sea ice extent. So, in the AMOC shutdown, the sea ice is supposed to recede in the Southern Ocean because of the warming, but our warming is not that strong in this time series, you know. So, like when I'm comparing these years here, the warming is not that strong, so we don't have a change in sea ice. So, same way, I would expect a bit of a lag in the change in the precipitation as well. Um, but not a lot though. I mean, I'm really like this is not my expertise here, but I'm really not sure how the Foxy records date the time scale. So the whether the time would show up in 100 years uh, or decades or 1,000 years. But in models, what we do is like just average like last 50 years of the time period that we want to assess, that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, so like you mentioned, so the records for Atlantic are most widely studied. There are some records for Australia, for the northern part as well, but there are uncertainty, and there's definitely uncertainty with the timing as well. I'm not sure how much lag they are showing, but they are showing some differences with the timing of the event, the Henrich event or the Amok shutdown event, and the timing that is seen in the changes in precipitation. Um, but this climate that we are doing, 49K, we are doing a AMOC shutdown in this 49K as well because we are interested in the Henry Stradale 5 scenario here. These Paleothem records are being assessed by Russell Trisdale and his student, and they have it in the south of Australia. So I don't have, so that's a manuscript in preparation. So their records are present somewhere here, like southern Australian region. I'm hoping she would talk about the timing or the lag of the response there. If she doesn't, I'll get back to you. But yeah, I think that's an interesting question to answer. Um, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the detailed answer. I mean, once again, a similar kind of question. I mean, with the current development we have with all the models, I
Mhm.
mean, what is the best time period that we are able to resolve? I mean, why I'm asking that because again, in model we have to put a lots of data. For example, past ice sheet variation, past CO2 variation,
Mm,
and in those measurements we have errors, and
mm,
those errors again go into the model. I
mm.
mean, what is the best I mean, what is the best resolution we can have with the models? I mean, can are we able to resolve hundreds of years or tens of years, or we are stuck with the millennial scale changes? I mean, what do you think?
In terms of resolution,
I mean,
let me, yeah.
for example, why I'm saying so, because for if for CO2, let's say we have very highly resolved records
Mm,
that you can
mm,
put into your model. But
yeah.
again, if you don't have that highly resolved record for past ice sheet changes, then
Correct.
there is no benefit of having a highly resolved CO2 record because again, that error will go into your model. I mean,
Mm.
how difficult it is to have a highly resolved, I mean, how difficult it is to see the quick changes with models. I mean, for example, let's say as you are discussing about 8.2 kiloyears, that event lasted for a few hundreds of years. So are we able to see that very efficiently with models? Or, I mean, it's very difficult to see.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought it up because the thing is, that's where my comment about, like the proxy side and the climate modeling side have to work together because, like you mentioned, if I have suppose just a one single record of CO2, I will use it for my model because that's the only one available. But if we have different records, then we'll know, okay, that this is the uncertainty and how much the uncertainty is. So, for example, LGM, the last glacial maximum, is the climate for which we have most number of records. It's been most studied and most, yeah, like there are marine sediment records, there are ice sheet records, everything that are mostly resolved for LGM. So, LGM would be the climate that um, a model should get right because well, yeah, we have most records for that one. But in that also, how much is the range? So for example, if one record says that the LGM CO2 was 200, and if the other record says, well, it was not 200, it was 240, then there's a big difference. But if one record says it was 200, one says it's 190, then it's fine for us. We don't care about 10 ppm difference in simulating such a climate. Like we are fine with it. As for the ice sheets, so there are different types of ice sheet reconstructions as well now. For even for LGM, there are like three different types of ice sheets. When I went for the Govan ice sheets, I should have mentioned it maybe. So it's the Govan et al. 2021 paper that we are using for our setup. Lately, it's the ice sheet that has resolved a lot of uncertainty from the previous ice sheet reconstructions. So this is becoming something that a lot of modeling communities are opting for because it has improved from the previous reconstructions. So that's how we work. We take the one which has improved on from the previous one. So we heavily rely on the data that has been fed to us, really. Um, but if you say the temperature change, for example, like there is the CO2 which is correct, but the ice sheet is wrong, I would still simulate my climate and see how much temperature I'm seeing. If the temperature difference is say 4 degrees cooler in 49K compared to PI, and that is something that we have from the proxy record as well, then my climate is fine. It's just again to point out that I have one single ice core record from Greenland and like two or three from Antarctica. So that's the limitation basically. But I would also hope that like of course, like I'm talking about regional climate here. So there are regional differences, but I would still hope that the Greenland Antarctic record is true for the whole Greenland. So it was colder, especially because it was the magnitude is so large, you know. So I would expect that, okay, this is correct. But if we had um, temperature records. So we have actually marine sediment records which tell us about SST. So we have many sediment records that I can test for this one. So that's what I do with my models. Like I take all the records that I can take, and luckily it's good that they are present in different locations, so I can test my whole global picture with that record. And if there is something wrong with one of them or two of them, which there is, like there is uncertainty, there are some records which might be wrong here. um, for Southern Ocean, we don't have so many records because of obvious limitation that we can't reach everywhere, right? And that is the purpose of climate modeling, actually, because we can't reach everywhere, we can't get all the records. We do climate modeling so that we can have a global picture, so that we can test the processes, because these changes in atmospheric circulation won't be picked up by proxy records that are happening in like surface. This will be done by climate modeling. So that's how we work. Basically, we work with whatever we have. So yeah, sorry, I'm getting into all the detail, too many details.
Thank you for explaining in detail. And regarding that, because you have chosen a time period that is 49 kiloyears, and if you see the records, mostly, I mean, 80% of the records we have, they are based on radiocarbon dating, and 49K goes just at the end of the limit of radiocarbon dating. So it would be very
Oh,
difficult to find
okay.
lots of records.
Hmm. Yeah. But so,
Okay.
for example, so this is actually the good time period, right? Because I mean, and still there is a whole community which is trying to understand why we have such a huge millennial scale variability in just this time period, like MIS3, So this is marine isotope stage 3, and there are different temperature records, so they have all been put up here, right? It just I took this paper, but there is this Kindler temperature record and all these things. So I think yeah, that's where we need different types of records. So speleothems and everything is for rainfall, but other terrestrial records are also there for rainfall. And unfortunately, I am not working on all of them, but the people who are going to address this question will involve different terrestrial records just for rainfall. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It was great listening to your talk. And thank you
Okay.
again for explaining.
Thank you for the question.
I think we don't have any question. I just have one thing to, not just a question, but it's just kind of my self-doubt, like being a proper, geochemist, and I'm also trying to understand the past ocean circulation changes in the, like, basically in the Indian Ocean. We usually use the term like the amok changes is, controlling the summer monsoon or like Indian monsoon, okay, and which is ultimately related to the ITC jet movement. And then at some point we say that the ITC jet movement or the, this is controlling the amok somewhere. Like I just saw in your talk, like somewhere. So whether they are like they both are interdependent or just like is there any because we in my paper I always say the change in the amok it's changing the the fresh water or like the deep water formation at the pole side, and that's why ITCZ is shifting from south to north, north to south, then it's connected to the monsoon. So what
Hmm.
is your view on this? Like, is are they interdependent or someone is controlling some factor like some significant manner? Like AMOC has more control on ITCZ or ITCZ has a more control on AMOC?
Wow. Yeah, I wish if we could disentangle this response. They're definitely interconnected, all of them. So for just this picture, I would say that like it's very difficult to know which one is controlling what because we have the dominant picture is that we have a very strong weakening in AMOC, which is impacting ITCZ. But the ITCZ position is being impacted with the Arctic warming, which is also very significant. So then it would be really doing some correlation analysis, maybe, or disentangling Arctic warming versus AMOC weakening and seeing the impact on ITCZ. Um, but yeah, I mean, otherwise, it's, I think, very difficult to just take one as a culprit and other as a victim. Because so for example in the this study that I did, so I intentionally did different experiments where I changed only one type of forcing so that I know how much is impacting uh, or how much impact does anything have. So for this one I can say that ITCZ gets impacted by the topographical changes, not by orbital forcings, not by ash sheet mask, the topographical changes. So same kind of experiments we can do. We can do those kind of experiments that will tell us well which one is impacting what. But in the real world, I think they are very much interconnected. That it would be really hard to, just focus on one. So if I say that just focus on fixing AMOC and ITCZ would be fine, I can't say that because there's Arctic warming going on, which is also influencing ITCZ.
Yes.
So yeah.
Thanks for this,
Uh,
answering the question, and also thank you so much for this wonderful talk. I think now people should motivate themselves to, start putting the geochemical data, their observational, their laboratory data, in such kind of model to simulate the better, climate in the future. So I think people will get benefit from this talk, and we need a climate model like you because I'm a proper geochemist. I have like a very very less
Yeah,
idea about these kind of models, but I'm trying to understand because ultimately we need to simulate the future.
yeah,
So
yeah.
okay, I think we don't have any question in the chat box. I think there's one comment from Akansha, and she's looking for. Can you please share the link of the paper that?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. The 8.2 paper, right? Yeah.
If you can just share it with me, I will share in the group, and I think I can
Yes,
directly
perfect.
send it to Akansha. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay,
Yes,
so
yes, I will.
again,
Yes.
thank you so much, Madhu, for your time,
Thank
and
you.
thanks everyone for joining. And I will upload this recording on YouTube with the permission.
Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank
Bye bye,
you.
Partha. Bye bye.